Time is a thief. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the focus group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the focus group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John Nash, on his birthday week.
That's scary all by itself, right?
You know, I was upset because usually these were fun times in the studio when we were in studio.
Yeah.
And we could bring in little cakes and desserts. And we usually, with the last half of any of our shows, we would celebrate with some sort of dessert or champagne and cocktail or something.
I think we evolved to Prosecco over time as well, right?
Prosecco, and sometimes I'd bring up those night kitchen cakes.
Those night kitchen cakes are amazing.
And then you discovered the donuts or those things from that Korean bakery. Didn't you discover some sort of thing you got? And then we had lemon squares. I mean, over the years,
that's lemon squares from down in Chelsea. Yeah, that was one of your favorites. Yeah.
And over the years, though, we've had all kinds of things. But now that we've been, for my birthday 2 years ago, I think you had the chef from Seinfeld that left me a birthday greeting. But so we'll have to someday when we're all together again, we'll have to celebrate. But I have a business question for you, Mr. Nash. And I don't know if you know this, and I don't know where. Maybe our listeners might know where I can find this information out. So I had back surgery in April 2018, which left my leg somewhat dead. I can't ski, I can't run, I can't do any of those things, but I don't have back pain. However, 2 weeks ago, so I my insurance covered what they were going to cover. We went back and forth. I was on a payment plan. It was all done as far as I was concerned. End of 2020, I suppose. And when I moved, I, for the first time, decided not to keep things around and threw everything away. A week and a half ago, I got a bill from the hospital for like $4,900, which I think is insane. Almost 4 years later, a bill from the hospital. Like, what's the statute of limitations on that? Do you know any organization that would bill somebody 4 years later?
No. Well, the government is kind of good about that. So is the city. They'll go back through their records and they'll run what they call like a computer audit, where they'll plug in something and see if you missed something, and up comes a bunch of people. But for the hospital, it sounds like they're going through their billing system and they're looking to find money. And
I went to the insurance company and they said, we've closed the case. The insurance company couldn't even go back that far to look. They could only go back as far as February 2019. They said, we don't even have the record of the surgery.
Wow,
now. We're beyond that. So then I called the hospital. They're blaming the insurance company. The insurance company is blaming the hospital. I said, my copay, I said, what the bottom line is, I guess the hospital didn't like, even though they're all in network, the hospital didn't like what the insurance company paid. So there was this discrepancy, and they want me to pay it. I don't want to pay it.
You shouldn't have to. And this goes all the way back. Yeah, this is long before.
April will be 4 years.
It's okay. So it was. Yeah, you're right. So this seems like they're. Are they getting nasty about it, or are they?
Well, no. They sent an email, a text.
That's okay.
The first thing was a text. They sent a text saying, I owe this money. So I thought it was a joke, right? So it said opt out. So I hit opt out. Then I got an email saying, we see you opted out. You owe $4,900, And I, again, unsubscribed. So then they sent a letter saying, you owe us, So I called, it comes in just with a little Visa thing, like pay by Visa, pay by check, like a credit card bill. I said, what is this? They said, oh, it's a hospital bill. I said, for what? I said, there's no backup. There's no detail. I said, you think I'm just going to write you a check for $4,900 or do a credit card payment for $4,900 when I don't even know what it's for? Well, she says, so she was confused. So she said, well, you have to call the insurance company. Insurance company doesn't have it. They said, we closed the case.
Wait, when you called them, was it actually the hospital's billing department that you had?
Yes.
It really, truly was the billing. Because you know what this sounds an awful lot like? When companies roll up debt, so someone doesn't pay their credit card or whatever, and they sell the debt to someone else who starts collecting it. This sounds a lot like some weird collections thing where they're using the hospital as a front end. Maybe the hospital said, well, these are miscellaneous charges we never collected on. And I don't know, there's something weird about this, because if they can't even tell you what the backup is, right?
Well, she said she's going to send it. So, but, the whole issue there, as you know, too, I was supposed to be the first surgery at 6 a.m. in the morning, but the hospital, for whatever reason, didn't bring me back until almost 1:30. So then I had to spend the night.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's what the whole discrepancy was with the insurance. I wasn't authorized to spend the night. Well, it wasn't my decision to spend the night. I didn't want to spend the night.
I remember that, yeah.
Right, because of anesthesia and everything. So then the insurance company and the hospital and the doctor fought. But it was because the hospital didn't get me back in time. So, again, I became the victim in this thing. So I don't know what to do. I don't know if there's a statute of limitations of when somebody could come after you for a bill, or if, Richard said maybe I should just call the president of the hospital and explain what happened. He goes, you won't talk to them? He said, but get his email or her email and send a letter to the president of the hospital and explain your situation. But I'm going to fight it, I think, because I am so aggravated by the whole thing. I can't imagine any business that would send somebody a bill
4 years after the fact.
4 years later.
With no
backup.
With no backup until you request the backup. Yeah, I would definitely fight it. I wouldn't. It's strange. I mean, how could they have accounting like this? They have bookkeeping to do as well. They have year-end financials. So where was this sitting that it was ignored for? Yeah. Fight it.
It's aggravating. So anyway, that was I didn't know if you knew if there was some law. I looked online to see if there was some law. There is certain things where they say a year, but I don't know what you can enforce.
I just think this whole. Well, look, it puts a spotlight on something you and I have talked about many, 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 many times. The healthcare system is
broken.
Yeah, I was going to use the word busted, same thing, but busted always implies to me like a child put a toy together and it got knocked down. I mean, that's how fractured this thing seems to be. And proof in the pudding, 4 years after a very major surgical event and a hospital stay, you're getting a mystery bill for $4,900, which is not. Let's say they sent you a bill for $350. Right. In fact, that's an interesting question. Let's say they sent you a bill for $350, maybe $425, and they said there was a discrepancy in the billing for the anesthesia, and and this was not covered or not caught. This is the differential. Would you have paid it?
I would have still fought it because I would be like, I think it's a little too late.
Okay, so it's not even.
It would be no different in our business, John. In an ad agency, if you and I went through now and all of a sudden said, let's go back and rebill some clients.
Would never happen. It could never happen.
Can you imagine going back to a client that we had 4 years ago and saying, oh, by the way.
Yeah, the amount of,
We forgot to bill you for 7 hours that John spent working on something late night over a weekend, and we didn't charge you time and a half.
Yeah.
So you owe us an additional $15,000 for his time over that weekend.
Yeah, the amount of checks and balances.
Their books are closed.
Yeah. You and I used to have to submit invoices with the detail level was excruciating. Let's put it that way. And I get it, but yeah, you're right. We couldn't pull that one. Although, I wonder if we tried it.
Well, I'm thinking at this point you might as well, right? We should go back and say our time was not allocated properly. Go back to every client you ever worked with. I mean, that's kind of what this is like. Say, we didn't allocate our time properly. You owe us money.
Let's scrape together.
See if somebody pays.
Let's get some coins scraped together, huh?
Yeah, well, I think it's absurd. So anyway, are you doing anything special for your birthday?
Bob just asked me about it. I completely forgot that it was this week because there's a lot of things.
Oh, stop! You didn't forget.
No, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm like, wait a minute, it is this week, and it's Thursday, and we're just probably gonna do dinner or something. My big things are, I think I mentioned on Unbutton, I'm waiting for Dune to come out. There's a couple shows I want to watch, but yeah, nothing. Maybe if it's a nice day, I'll do a bike ride. But it's one of those odd birthdays. It's close to something, far enough away. It's not something you would do a major party for. So yeah, we'll do something special. We'll do dinner or something. But
I have a couple of pictures I found of you and I in high school. I may post on the birthday.
You go ahead. That's okay.
On our Facebook page, Focus Group. I can either run them by you first. Now the picture we're all waiting for, your brother-in-law mentioned, which we've yet to find. We've yet to see, John. You promised.
This is me as the Easter
Bunny. Your mother made you dress like the Easter Bunny.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I could show you the picture, but basically I'm in a bunny costume.
We want to see it.
All right, I have one. Yeah, I have one where Greg's sitting on my lap, Emma's sitting on my lap. All right, I'll dig those up. Yeah, and Steve's good. He has most photos that he's done are digitized now, so he could call that up pretty rapidly.
Okay, so with that, Mr. Nash, what caught your eye this week?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
I think you'll appreciate this one, Tim, since we've only been able to do this once or twice in our lives, and it's about flying private jets. And the headline reads, Private jet attendants tell all about flying the super rich. So I'll kick off the thing with their first paragraph. After decades as a flight attendant on private jets, Lori has encountered it all. There was a pot-bellied pig that took a plane ride by itself, a celebrity's guard dog that bit a member of the crew, and a British footballer who asked if he could change his knickers. He got butt-ass naked right there in front of me, said Lori, who asked to be identified only by her first name. And that wasn't her only run-in with the football. On another trip, he boarded his plane in New York after spending the night partying with his wife. As Lori made her way back to the athlete's cabin, his assistant asked her to stop. They're shagging in the back, the assistant said. She shrugged and stayed out of the way. So you would think that, that there's all these stories about what might go on private jets, and there are. So we're talking things like net jets and some of these other, aircraft you could rent by the flight or by the day, or some people actually are rich enough to have their own plane and flight crew. So they go through a couple of things, and attendants are pretty tight-lipped. And one of the reasons why is when they're hired, they go through a very excruciating process of being trained how to be discreet. So they don't really share a lot. But things fall out. For example, Adam Newman, who was the founder of WeWork, if many of you remember the WeWork spaces that were the co-working things, ran up huge stock price, and then it all kind of collapsed. And then someone came and bought it, but allegedly smoked weed with his friends on a private flight to Israel. And he left behind in the cabin a large amount of pot for the ride home. The freaked out jet company worried about so-called trans-border marijuana transport and ditched him in the Holy Land. So they went doors up, they flew away. They're like, we're not staying here in case something happens, right? That could be bad. So then they look at drug use in general, and they said the flight attendants who spoke with the Daily Beast said they rarely encountered issues with drugs, but alcohol is the bigger concern. That's definitely, in my opinion, probably the most touchy subject, said one employee based in the Northeast. On commercial flights, there's a lot of backup. If people get rowdy or whatever, you can kind of shut it down. But in private, it's really hard to cut off a billionaire on their aircraft, right? So then they broke this down, and I think you're going to relate to this. For the most part, business people tend to be super well-behaved, staffers said, since they're often just commuting from one conference room to another. Celebrities, professional athletes, and rich kids are more prone to debauchery, as are wannabe billionaires. That last category, they said, they're all crazy wealthy, but the less wealthy were the more demanding, said a contract worker based in the South. So they outline a couple other things where sometimes this attendant would be on a plane with two dogs, and the dogs were literally flown 5 hours to the other spouse's house for the weekend, and they were flown, like rich people have two mansions, the dogs go back and forth. Sometimes they have to handle luggage. And then there's tips. One VIP attendant said a customer offered her a free Super Bowl ticket after she dropped him off at the game. She declined, opting to stay with the rest of the crew. Another worker who spent time in the Middle East said that clients were known to hand out Rolexes, even, quote, suitcases full of money. That kind of craziness. So there you go. Tales of, flying, flying the crazy rich on,
That's like, what's his name? Les Wexner was the guy from Abercrombie.
Yep.
They used to talk about how he had his own plane for the company, but he had to have those guys dressed like the Abercrombie models, I guess. It looked like they would be shirtless, or they would have certain hats or certain clothing to wear. Remember that whole story
had to have
about him?
Yep, they had to have the body, the look, the whole bit,
Yeah, I if I had, I wanted to buy the Powerball ticket. I think it was up to $534 million. I would get a plane then.
Yeah. Well,
would you have a plane?
No, I would. You'd rent one. You get a subscription. Yeah, but I agree with you. Yeah, because that would be quite the way to travel. You and I have only done it once or twice, I think, and it was cool. I give you that, but yeah.
Well, it's a great way to great way to get around if you can do it. And but yeah, you'd want to be able to come and go as you want, or just say you want to be able to go. But having your own is one thing, but renting them, you have to be on schedule. Of course, the people we knew
were not
didn't
on schedule.
Necessarily adhere to that and understand you needed to adhere to a schedule. But that was you get what you pay for. Well, that's interesting. I bet there's a lot more
Oh, I'm sure there's more dirt that they're not saying.
Antic.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more of it. But the last little bit there about how the not quite as wealthy were the hardest to deal with, it reminds me of your smallest accounts are the hardest ones and the biggest are the easiest. Yeah, not the same
Or
kind of.
right, or some of the guests that we had were usually the more famous. In some cases, the more famous were better than the less famous.
Yeah, surprisingly, right?
Tim Gunn and Ron Reagan and Jesse Ventura. Remember Jesse Ventura? He was going to be our best friend. Remember?
He was easy to talk to. He was so fun. You guys were great. Yeah, totally. All right. So what caught your eye?
So this one I had seen. This came from CNN, and I just laughed. Well, probably shouldn't laugh, but I laughed when I saw it. The headline is: "A gravestone missing for 150 years was being used as a marble slab to make fudge."
So is that where you got this headline? Marble fudge making slabbed missing tombstone.
Yeah.
It's a weird. I had to think about it. Marble fudge making slabbed missing tombstone. Okay.
Oh, well, I guess it should have been marble fudge making marble. I must have typed it wrong. It was it should have been slab. But anyway, there was a missing tombstone which this woman had used to make. So there's an older woman in Okemos, Michigan. So she lived in this little town in Michigan, and she had this big piece of marble in her kitchen. And she since had gotten old, and she was being put into a home. So the family had were taking the contents of her home and putting it up for auction and having an estate sale. And so they called in this company to do the auction, and they found this big piece of marble in her kitchen that she'd had there forever. And the auctioneer flips it over and sees that it's a tombstone.
Oh my God.
And so he says to the family, he's like, "What's this?" And they're like, "Well, that's what Mom used to make fudge in since we've known her for the last, 100 years." So he said, "Well, I don't know if we should sell this." So they start looking. So they contact the Friends of Lansing's Historic Cemeteries, FOLHC. The president. So,
Okay.
So the president, Loretta Stanaway, starts looking, and they say to her, "We've got this tombstone, and we're guessing it's somewhere nearby here in the Michigan area, and can you help us locate maybe where this could go?" And so the pictures, if you're watching on the video, is so this grave has been missing. They think the grave's over 150 years old, has been missing this piece of marble for, they figure, at least 100 years.
So Tim, on this shot here, this is the before. This is just
Right.
It looks like there's a slab laying on the grass and one standing behind
Right.
it, and then the after that you sent. That must be from the kitchen, the one that's been put back in the center, right?
Right. They fixed it and they put it back up. So she had it. So the writing and everything there that you see, that was all facing down. So it's smooth on the back. And, marble's great for making fudge or candy or taffy or whatever. It's nice and cool. And it's smooth. So that's what she had it in the kitchen there for many, many years, as long as these kids can remember making candy and fudge, particularly they said seasonal fudge. So they ended up
Halloween fudge. Yeah.
Yeah, so they ended up trying to find out where this would belong. So they said they looked all over. They tried to find relatives to try to figure out where this belonged, and they wound up that it was a gentleman who died named Peter J. Weller. He died in 1849 in Lansing, Michigan. He was buried in the Oak Park Cemetery, according to Stanaway, from the FOLHC, Friends of the Lansing Historic Cemeteries. And but his grave was moved. So they had moved him in 1875 to the Mount Hope Cemetery. And they think what happened then is when they were moving him, somebody had taken, in 1875, somebody took the marble slab and that never made it to the cemetery. So there was just this other chunk laying there. So this gravestone had been missing for 146 years.
Wow.
And
okay.
so they returned it. He's buried next to his two daughters and a daughter-in-law. And they had a little service. He's been there buried now for 172 years. They had a little service on Sunday for him at when they put the stone back up last week in Michigan.
Just someone had it in their kitchen making seasonal fudge. I actually think the way you had it typed out there, I might even leave it there, Marble
What did I say?
marble fudge
Marble
making
fudge.
slabbed SL, because slabbing, they're actually, I had to look it up, and there was a headline that used the same term, missing tombstone. So
Marble fudge making slab.
yeah,
It should have been slab found.
this is why I should always double check for proofreading purposes. Yeah.
Well, slabbed. I don't know why one slab. Here's my problem with a lot of my typing lately with a lot of this stuff. This
Autocorrect.
spell check and the autocorrect, particularly in my text, it's a mess.
Yeah, let's not even go there. I've had to apologize a number of times for that personally.
Yeah, well, me too. So, hey, a lot of people know that friends of ours here at the Focus Group are deep discount. And if you head over to focusgroupradio.com and click on the deep discount logo, you can start shopping away. And Mr. Nash is going to tell you about a new release that they have. So, Mr. Nash, take it away.
Yeah. So, you know how shows come out and people go crazy and they tell you have to watch it. And I almost, as a reaction, don't watch it because I'm like, unless it's this is a show that HBO Max began airing, and it's called The Mayor of Easttown, and it stars Kate Winslet as Marianne Mayer Sheehan. And there was a lot of buzz about The Mayor of Easttown, and everybody I know who watched it loved it. We began watching it. We're in love with it. It's one of those rare ones that come along where if everybody loves it, guess what? They're right. Kate Winslet does an amazing job. She puts on I guess I want to say they call it like a South Philly or Philly, South Jersey. There's a name they gave her accent, which is different than the rest of the state speaks, apparently. And she worked really hard to nail it. And apparently she did really well. Like we saw an episode on NPR. We listened to an episode of NPR where they had a speech pathologist on talking about how they had to train actors to do these accents. And apparently Kate Winslet nails that Philly. When you see her talking, she's like British. Then when you see her in Mayor of Easttown, she's doing the Philly thing. But it's a really, really well done show, well cast. Another favorite of mine is in the show Guy Pearce. You might remember Guy Pearce was in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert as well. So Mayor of Easttown is a new release. And if you're not streaming or you're not a subscriber to HBO Max, by all means, pick up Mayor of Easttown on Blu-ray because it's a show that I really, really think you'll like. So we highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's the Delaware County south of the airport accent. Lots of O's.
That's what it was.
Goes, home,
That's what it was, yeah.
Yo, go.
and they talk about how she had to practice that. It's really crazy.
Yeah, it's,
all right.
It's horrible accent, I think.
And it's unique to the region. So
yes.
it's like totally like this little part of the state. All right, we're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, we have business, birthday, and shop talk, so stay with us.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Now back to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Available pretty much everywhere.
Hey, welcome back to the Focus Group. Tim Bennett here with birthday boy, Mr. John T. Nash. Be sure to head over to focusgroupradio.com, find out all about us and also all of our media, which is housed there. And we haven't said this in a long time, but John had said we picked up a few new likes and reviews. So be sure to like us, rate us, and review us. And only if you're going to give us a good review.
Well, actually, over at iTunes, I don't check too often, but I did check, and there are a couple of new reviews. So thank you, listeners, if you're reviewing the show and you've given us 5 stars. Most everybody says the same thing. It's like sitting with friends, blah, blah, blah. The last couple of weeks we played a game we used to play on our live show called Pick That Flick, and it was a compliment to the most popular game in the universe, which was Tim's List, which was one of our favorite games to always play. So Tim would do a top 10, and if you got Tim, did we do it like if you got the first, second, and third, or was it only socks for people that? Or did you...
Socks for number 1, and then you'd always pick a number, right? It was 1 through 10. So if you guess this, that way. There were more chances to win. So if somebody picked number 3 or number 7, they could also win socks.
Yeah, and over the many years, we built up a wonderful email list of people who've played, and And we were in Provincetown, actually, a couple of years ago. We were doing a test drive of a Jetta, and we saw people wearing focus group socks. One of our listeners, Billy, who invited me to that Ghent fly-in a few weeks ago, I talked about on one of our shows, a small plane fly-in. He was wearing a pair. He sees people wearing them. So on these last couple of weeks, we played this Criterion game where we gave away discs. Some people, if you missed getting the disc, you're getting socks because we have them. And that made me think that we would love to do this again. And so maybe in the near future, you'll see a little survey from us. We're kind of toying with the idea of maybe going live again using this format. And one of the things you could do live is play Tim's list. I have to think about how that would be in the Wild West, because we had a call screener back then who would like kind of ferret out some of the...
Right. Which is a good question for our listeners. So if they wanted to chime in, and I guess they could send you a note at letters@focusgroupradio.com and let us know what time, if we were live again, so you could call in or play, would it be best for the audience? Would it be drive time? Would it be
evening? Hey, Tim, when does Aunt Barbara do her Tupperware shows?
She does Saturdays at 9 o'clock.
At night? 9 at night?
9 o'clock at night, Saturday. She does it through Facebook Live. And she averages anywhere between, 200 to 400 people that are on Facebook Live. And she interacts with them. Facebook Live is a very different thing. And she can see who's on, I guess, through the monitor or whatever. And she references them that way. They don't speak to one another, but she has a whole cast of characters behind her. But this, as you're talking with this software, I guess would be we'd actually have people call in and talk to us, and or if we played the list, they could actually call in, almost like a Zoom call or Skype call or something.
They could join the show, and if they were on a camera, they would pop in when we pulled them in from the green room. So if you're listening and you say to yourself, I'll give Tim and John some guidance, letters@focusgroupradio.com. We may run a survey. In the past, whenever we've done focus group surveys, we always give away gift cards, and we usually only ask about 4 or 5 questions. You could usually do it on your iPhone while you're waiting to check out at the grocery store. But we were really targeted. But we're wondering about this because we're investigating new technology for bringing the show to you folks. And this was one thing that popped up in a lot of people that were guessing on the Criterion game. They're like, wow, we miss the ability to talk to you guys live. And so if you change the format up, and that's why the timing, and that's why I was curious about Aunt Barbara. I love Aunt Barbara. Every time we've ever had her on, my head splits open from the laughter. She's just a wonderful human, huh?
Yeah, she had a big party last weekend at the VFW hall with all of her... fans, I guess, or like family, and she did a big event I saw on social media. I would have liked to have gone, but haven't traveled too much with the.
You may be traveling to New York for a day trip, maybe if we do the Comic-Con thing.
Yeah,
and that.
Did you get the socks, by the way?
I did, thank you, and that's what made me. I have a nice batch of socks, folks, to give away. So maybe if we come up. Well, we'll figure this out. We'll talk about it some more, but yeah.
And a hello to our friends in Palm Springs again.
I was just going to bring up
running in Palm Springs, right?
Radio 111. Yeah. So Palm Springs listeners, if you want us live out there, chime in.
Well, we want to go out. Well, yeah, we keep talking about we're threatening that we're going to go out there in January.
Is it a threat when you don't follow through?
Right, because we always threaten we're going to rent a place out there for the month of January and do the show.
Live in lap of luxury.
We've been saying that for 14 years. but that hasn't happened yet, but we'd love to do that. So, let's head over to our business birthday then.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
Aside from Mr. Nash's birthday, which is Thursday on the 30th.
Thank you.
Today's the 29th, which is Wednesday. So it's Laszlo Biro, or Biro, depending upon where you live. It's Laszlo, and I'll say Biro.
I say Biro too, yeah.
It's Laszlo Biro's birthday. He invented the now ubiquitous ballpoint pen. Now, even though the ballpoint pen was invented, they said roughly 50 years before him by a gentleman named John Loud, there was no commercial success with that pen. This was the very first commercially successful ballpoint pen done by Laszlo Biro, and he was born in Hungary. But interestingly, in 1899, he died October 1985 at 86 years old. And I'd never seen this before because usually they talk about Americanizing somebody's name.
Mm-hmm.
But he had fled to Argentina because he was of Jewish heritage, and during the Nazi issues in Europe with Germany and so forth, he fled to Argentina. So they said that he had his name Hispanicized
Okay. Okay.
to Laszlo Jose Biro. So that's why Biro or Biro.
Okay.
So he became a Hungarian Argentinian. And so the very first patent for a ballpoint pen came out of Argentina. And if you're watching that's why that advertisement, if you're watching on the video, is in Spanish. That was the very first advertisement for a ballpoint pen there in Spanish, Mr. Nash.
Escribe con tinta. Yeah, it took me. I thought it was in Italian for a second. Then I'm like, no, wait a minute. This is Spanish. Yeah.
So anyway, I spelled his name, Laszlo Joseph,
Biro.
But he invented the ballpoint pen. He was a previously they said writers would just take and dip their pens in inkwells or fountain pens in inkwells, and but they would always smudge and they'd be splotchy. And they said he was always a tinkerer, even as a kid. So the pen thing really bothered him. He was a journalist, and he would always be bothered by the smudge and of the inkwells and so forth. And so he also tinkered with, they said, a steam-powered washing machine he had a patent for, as well as an automatic transmission for cars. But he really made his money with the ballpoint pen. And they said what he figured out was when he watched printing presses, he realized that the ink on a printing press would dry a lot quicker than that you would find on a ballpoint pen. So he tried using printing press ink for fountain pens, but it was too viscous and it didn't flow properly. So his brother was a chemist, so he talked to his brother about trying to alter the ink, and they came up with this idea of the tiny roller ball at the end of a socket, so that would control
flow,
control flow and access, and regulate the flow and not have the spotchiness occur. So he ended up getting a patent in France in 1938, and then he took off to Argentina, where he opened up Biro Pens of Argentina to start manufacturing there. And for several years, he sold them. Guess how much the pens would sell for in that time? So this is 1940, say 1940. They were sold in department stores. It was a luxury item.
So if it were $1940, am I wrong in assuming it might have been like a $20 item, 15 to 20?
You're close. It's $12.
$12, okay.
But which is expensive, right?
That would be 40 or 50 bucks, yeah.
Yeah. So they said in in June 1943, he filed another patent in the U.S. for a writing instrument and formed Biro Pens of Argentina at the same time. And they said the ballpoint pen in Argentina is known as a birome.
Perfect.
And his new design that he formed, or his new design for the pen, he sold the idea to the United Kingdom, and they would supply it to the Royal Air Force and the aircrew. In 1945, he sold the rights to a guy named Marcel Bich.
You mean the Bic pen, right?
Bich, and then Bich.
Still made today. Still made today.
He dropped the H off, and so Bic Pens made both Bic and Biro millionaires. So he sold the patent rights to Bic, and then he made a royalty deal with them. So they said they were able to do this royalty idea, and the tagline or the advertising idea they came with was right first time, every time.
That's right. I remember that. They used that for a long time. That was when we were kids too, right?
Yeah. So this was 1945. They said the Bic pen became the main product for the Bic company. They sold to date over 100 billion ballpoint pens worldwide. Laszlo, as I said, Laszlo Biro died in Argentina in 1985. They have something they call Inventor's Day in Argentina, which is celebrated on his birthday, which is the 29th of September. The ballpoint pen in many areas is still referred to, particularly in the UK, Ireland, Australia, and Italy, as a Biro.
Biro.
Which I've never heard that before.
Neither. Well, I might have heard it.
Like, give me a Biro or give me a BRoll.
Biro, yeah. This is a great birthday, and for a number of reasons. I write with a Mont Blanc pen, either a ballpoint or a roller ball, which is a little different. The ink comes out a little differently. And I went to get a roller ball cartridge at a store downtown called the Fountain Pen Hospital. And the guy's talking
that's great.
Yeah, and they have all kind of pens. And the guy's talking to me, and we're laughing. And he said, "Do you prefer roller ball or ballpoint?" I said, "I like both, but this is for roller ball." And I said, and I saw on the counter a display for Fisher pens. But Fisher used to make the space pen. It could write any angle. It could write in space.
Upside down.
Yeah. So the guy looked, I said, "Oh, the Fisher space pen." He goes, "Yeah, let me tell you something about that pen." He said, "The space program spent billions of dollars to make a pen that could write in space. He goes, "You know how the Russians do it?" I said, "What do the Russians do?" He goes, "They take a piece of paper and a pencil." Because pencils doesn't. That was like months ago. That story landed on me, and I just never forgot it because I thought it was brilliant. Right?
The Russians do it. Take a pencil.
Pencil and a piece of paper. They don't have to worry about inventing something that writes upside down or in zero gravity. So
that's hilarious.
Good birthday. All right, what do we have for our
anyway,
shop?
so he ends up, they also did that. They said Google. See, I wouldn't have known this. It's just one little other fact. They said on his birthday in 2016, Google did a doodle of his name for Biro. But yet you'd have to be a pretty smart person, right, to know that that was his
that was
his
the
day.
inventor of
So
the
anyway,
ballpoint pen.
That was his business birthday. So born right before you, Mr. Nash. The inventor of the ballpoint pen.
Oh, perfect.
So, John had found this article for our shop talk, and I'll be curious what you think. I kind of thought it was a little bit cynical, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I'll just read the headline. Your time management won't work until you realize how little time you have. And so
dun.
Right. This is in reference to a book written by Oliver Burkeman. And it's called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. And he breaks down how much time you really have on Earth. So they said, obviously, if you were 80 years old, or if you lived to the average age of 80, that's 29,200 days.
Yeah.
Which I didn't think sounded like much. He thought that sounded like a lot. I didn't think that was a big number. Did you?
If I were 15, it would be huge. The age we're at now, or the one I'm crossing the borderline on Thursday, I'm like, yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, nah, it's not as many as you think. But then he took that and he divided the 80 by weeks, and he got 4171, which led him to the 4,000 week conclusion. 4,000 is a number that I definitely look at and say, yeah, I can wrap my head around that. That's not a lot, right?
Right. And so then he essentially talks about how the idea of productivity and about how we always try to get work-life balance, and with time management and so forth, and that we basically fail at it. And that the writer of this article, who's read the book, a guy named Chris Taylor, essentially comes up with his 5 takeaways from the book, and or some of the most memorable things that he got out of the book of these 4,000 weeks. Did you the synopsis of the upfront part about the productivity trap? Did I set that up right, or would
you? Yeah, you did. So basically, his whole thesis based on this book is that with so little time, we really have to be thoughtful about what we claim we want to accomplish, and to-do lists and inbox zero and all these techniques we've developed to make us feel like we're accomplishing something. They're actually, if you got the same thing I did, he kind of throws them in the category of distractions. They're distracting you from the real task at hand. And he even went so far as to, towards the end of the article, he talked about the fact that, like, if you look at Steve Jobs, you say to yourself, he'll never be forgotten. He's made a mark on the world. And he said, well, try doing that, in 12,000 weeks. Will people think of him differently? And it's true. I mean, history will always be there, but... So what he was trying to do is frame the discussion about time management and work and about what you really want to get done in the notion of you're not here that long, don't be easily distracted. But there's a lot of what I call countervailing winds in this thing. So you think the wind's coming from the north, it's actually coming from the north and the west, or from multiple directions,
right.
Because he'll say one thing, then he'll turn around and do another. So one of the first things he talks about is what matters is supposed to be uncomfortable. And we've all experienced this where we're sitting down to do something and we begin to do it and we're like, I wonder what the stock market's doing. Or I wonder what the latest cat on a vacuum is on Facebook. And I'm being an ass about that, but on Facebook. But he said that the harder the task, the more easily we are distracted from it. And our world gives us plenty to distract us. And so the game here is to recognize that it's uncomfortable. You're supposed to be uncomfortable. You're not supposed to be having a great time. You're trying to get something hard done. Focus on it and stick with it, right?
Yeah, and at the end of that, I wrote, my takeaway from that, because it was quite a long explanation. I put, just do it. There's never a right time. Was my takeaway on that.
Or as one of our listeners once said, we gave away socks one year when we were on Sirius, when people would come in with their wisdom lines. And one of our listeners called in and she said, guys, I got one for you. The dread is worse than the deed.
Yeah.
Boy, is that true. Thinking about something is often worse than just doing it, right?
And that happens to me all the time. And I always think about that because I'll avoid something and then I'll do it and I'll be like, it wasn't so bad. I shouldn't have procrastinated 3 weeks about
3 weeks. I'll sum up that one by saying, he says, whenever we succumb to distraction, we're attempting to flee a painful encounter with our finitude meaning our finite lifespan, an experience that feels especially uncomfortable precisely because the task at hand is one we value so much. So I liked that one, and I agree with him, but hey, I fall into the distraction trap all the time. What was this second one?
The second one he says is waste time well. He said, part of knowing your limitations is knowing that you can't spend all your time on the important stuff, and that a lot of times he gave an example of sometimes people will overschedule their weekend, overcommit to try to squeeze everything in, and then don't enjoy any part of it. Or if you go on a vacation, you try to hit every single site and take all kinds of pictures because you're going to enjoy them later, but you never look at them because something else gets in the way. So he said, rarely do you ever get everything done that you want to, and you need to surround yourself with people or make sure all of you agree that you're going to have some, I called it me time, but essentially it's downtime. And he used the example of religions, of them having the day
Sunday,
off or the Sabbath, taking the Sunday, no work. But he said you have to really make sure you don't do it. And what did he call it? Idleness aversion. He said psychologists have a phrase for it. And I put at the end of this one, making sure that you take some me time.
Yeah, take me time.
He said it's impossible to do this so if you don't have a network of support around you, but it's important to take me time. You can't be trying to do something every single time because you're not going to ever get it done.
Yeah. And our culture actually makes us averse to relaxation. Work, right? His next one was make your to-do list tiny. And he basically says you can do 2 lists. A master list of all the big projects you want to get done, digitizing photos, new resume, you could put a ton of stuff on there. But your daily or weekly list should actually just be limited to 10 things, and promise yourself that you have to go through and get each one done, and you should ignore the big list. So you could draw from the big list, but make your little either daily or weekly to-do list short and that you can tackle it. And basically that trains us to be a little more realistic about how much time things actually take. So I thought that was a smart one myself, because if you don't do that, you're going to fail on a daily basis. You'll always have something that's moved from one list to another. It just becomes a game after a while, right?
Do you have 2 lists?
Yeah, I actually do. I have in one of my notebooks, I have like the master project list, and then the little one is the nuisance stuff that has to get done, renew the registration on the car, right. And those things take time, right? So, yeah.
Okay. Number 4 was research your relationships. I was somewhat confused by this one a little bit, but essentially it was sometimes it says unreasonably annoying. It's unreasonably annoying when the people you love don't act the way you expect.
Yeah.
And he said there's a difference between expecting people to act or hoping people act a certain way versus wondering how they would act. So he says wondering rather than hoping is the foundation of radical acceptance.
I think that,
I don't know if I totally agreed with that.
oh, I'm surprised you didn't. You gave me some of the best advice ever. Expectations are the foundations of disappointment. That's exactly a different way of stating that. If you
Well, that's what I was wondering, whether
Yeah.
that was that same thing.
If you're wondering about something, then the outcome is not known. If you're curious about it, then the outcome. But if you have an expectation, you're going to get let down, or something's going to happen, and you're going to rely on someone in X, Y, Z. So yes, so Tim, it's basically the other way of saying one of your favorite lines for me. And the last one here is, remember your cosmic insignificance. What a good way to end the shop talk, right? But he explained that, when he said, we spend our lives wanting to put a dent in the universe by having an impact on future generations. He said, but even Steve Jobs, who coined that phrase, failed to leave such a dent, writes Burkeman. Perhaps the iPhone will be remembered for more generations than anything you or I will ever accomplish, but from a truly cosmic view, say another 310,000 weeks, it will soon be forgotten. That's a nice one to remember. So if I had to sum all this up, it's like, be realistic. You don't have a lot of time. Choose your targets wisely. Don't fall into the distraction trap with while you're trying to get something done that you love, and stay curious about people that you're working with, and hope that the outcome is something you might like, but don't expect them to act a certain way.
It's awful both ways.
One of our favorite movies,
Big
by the way.
80, right? So it is what it is. It's awful both ways. I disagreed a little bit about the last one, though. I mean, do you think 2 centuries from now, you would still talk about Columbus, don't you think?
Yeah,
you would still
and
talk about
furthermore,
historical figures.
This reminds me of my friend Alex one day. He said, you and Tim have achieved a legacy. You guys can just relax. Your work is in textbooks. It's been talked about. It's been in newspapers. It could be researched. It could be looked up. And he was referring to our work with Subaru of America for our 15-year LGBT campaign. And he's right. And it took a while for me to let that sink in. I'm like, you know what? No one's going to pay attention to the animation I did in school, right? Or a picture I took, but we did achieve something. I don't know if we dented the universe.
No, but I would think, though, that you still talk about Columbus, you still talk about explorers, you still talk about. I would think Steve Jobs is pretty important.
I think his example with Steve Jobs is a little erroneous. He's going to be definitely remembered as someone who completely transformed the 21st century with his visionary technology and the creation of Apple. So yeah. So there you go, folks. Shop talk. Remember, you only got about 4,100 weeks. Use them well. Tune into the focus group. That's one good use, right? So we want to thank you for joining us today. Focusgroupradio.com is our URL. You'll find out all about us there, including our Tuesday podcast, TFG Unbuttoned. We would love you to subscribe, like, and rate. Thank you so much for joining us. We know your time's valuable. We'll see you in the new week.
It's The Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.